No two better words in all of sports. Game 7, Monday night. Let's get to work.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special Friday night Oilers Force a Game 7 edition of Locked On Oilers. I'm your host, Nick Zararis. Before we get to today's show, it's brought to you by Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Well, now you can with Ultimate Hockey GM. It's completely free, and Locked On listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On NHL in the game store. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the App Store's Ultimate Hockey GM. Start your dynasty today. Whole lot to unpack. Unfortunately, only have 30 minutes to play with on this episode, so going to have to be concise. But opening segment, we're going to talk about game 6 itself, the individual game. Then we'll start extrapolating outwards. We'll talk about how the series is trending. And then the final segment, we're going to psych ourselves up for this weekend because we are going to need every single minute we have of peace and sanity to prepare ourselves for the lunacy that Monday is going to entail, because it doesn't get better than this. This does not happen. Stuff like this does not happen. You look in the other sports. This has only happened once in Major League Baseball, the Red Sox in 2004, which we talked about on the Friday edition. The idea, you don't let us win tonight, because then we got Pedro and we got Schilling in Game 6. Anything can happen in a Game 7. Well, for the Oilers, we got Connor McDavid, we got Ryan McLeod and Stuart Skinner, and then anything can happen in a Game 7. So let's start with this individual game itself. You heard me talk about it, and the Locked On National folks were nice enough to clip it for me to post it on their feeds. I felt that if Edmonton was going to win this game, it was going to be in transition. They were going to get rush opportunities, and all 3 of their goals before the empty netters come directly off of rush chances. And it speaks to identifying opportunities. And the thing that's unique is Florida is a very good team. Obviously, they're here. But what makes them effective is how they wear you down, the cycle, the high to low passes, the deflections, the rebounds, the way they're able to kind of break you down over the course of a game. The problem with that mentality, and we've seen teams with similar play styles, we have seen Carolina run into this issue a lot over the last handful of years. We have seen the earlier iterations of the Flames under Daryl Sutter in the postseason run into this issue. Daryl Sutter Kings teams have run into this issue, where when you're down multiple goals, it's really hard to volume shoot your way back into a game. And that's kind of what happened here. And we have to talk about the offsides on the goal, the Barkov goal that was disallowed. And look, I understand the apprehension. I understand a lot of people are skeptical of the NHL. They are skeptical of the officials. They are skeptical of everything involved here. I understand said apprehension. It is reasonable. It is understandable. What I will say, I do not think there's anything nefarious going on here. I think the NHL understands this is Game 6, Stanley Cup final. You got the entire Friday night slate to yourself. Sure, there's some baseball, there's some WNBA, but you are dominating the national spotlight on a Friday night. No shenanigans are going on here. There wasn't a Gary Bettman leaning on the replay center to say, hey, we'd like a Game 7 on Monday. You saw the angle. The puck was still on the line, and it was Reinhart, was in the zone. It's offsides. Do I think they gave it more of a look than they typically would have in other situations? Yeah, I think they took more time than they usually would have. I think they gave it a little bit more of a benefit of the doubt than they would have if this were a regular season game in January between the Blue Jackets and the Senators. But that's the game. I said it earlier in the series when the Oilers were struggling and the Panthers were getting away with their typical after the whistles, their interferences when teams are trying to enter the zone against them, the moving picks. When you put the game in the hands of the officials, it's ultimately on the officials. You have to play better than the officials officiate. It is a burdensome standard. It is a frustrating standard, but you can't You cannot leave the game in the hands of the officials and then complain about that, because ultimately it does not matter. The officials are not going to change their mind. The league is not going to change their mind. The offsides rule is what it is. Do I think it's a dumb rule that you can review that? Yes, I do. I really do. I hope it goes away. It doesn't help. It is not having the intention of originally was supposed to. All it's doing is making people frustrated, and it did change the game, because at 2-0, very different from 2-1. And then, Oilers got it to 3, and then Florida got it to 3-1. But 3-1, very different from 2-1. So with that in mind, Edmonton has the lead. And then the thing that makes it interesting, and this is what I talked about before, and I'll reiterate again, when Edmonton gets going in transition, when they get clean zone exits, when they're able to regroup, get the puck, have their lead breakout guy, whoever it is, whether it's McLeod, whether it's Dylan Holloway, it's McDavid, they get the puck, straight line speed, force a Florida defender to commit. If they get around them, they're usually on net. If they don't get around them, they're able to get the puck in deep. You saw Zach Hyman doing a nice job of that a couple times. Zach Hyman, who scored the goal as well on a breakaway, on a rush opportunity. That's the key to breaking down Florida. Make their defenders play defense as individuals as opposed to letting them all be on the picture. And that's something that I thought the Oilers did a nice job of in this game, was when there were chances in their own zone, when Florida was compressed around Stuart Skinner and the defenseman around the net front. That typically means Florida is going to have 3 or sometimes even 4. If a defenseman is going to pinch up in between the circles, you're dealing with 4-on-4 there, and you're going to have more room going up the other way. That's kind of the trick when you want to get those quick rush opportunities, when you want to break out and you want to get to the other team's zone as fast as you possibly can. You need the other team to be down low, because then that means fewer numbers going back the other way, back checking. Part of what made Edmonton effective in this game was their opportunity to get going. When Edmonton is playing with a lead, they are a very different team than when they are playing from behind. It's not a coincidence that the games they've struggled in this series, Florida got out to a lead. They were able to beat them into a pulp, cycling high to low, wearing them down. And we've talked a lot about score effects on the show over the last week or so, that all of these games, the underlying numbers look pretty much the opposite of the score, because the scores have been lopsided. When a team gets out to a 3-0 lead, they start to turtle. I know I had read Corey Schneider of All Three Zones write-up of game number 5, and he mentioned the Oilers only had 2 shots on goal after their third goal, I believe, in game 5. And that tells you they got out to the lead, they stopped pushing, they stopped being aggressive, and Edmonton didn't pump the brakes as hard in this game. But one thing that did stick out to me, and the broadcast down here in the States on ESPN was hammering this over and over again, Florida just didn't look right. A lot of unnecessary turnovers, a lot of sloppy passes that aren't crisp, a lot of just, when you are at this point in the season, you are really used to every team looking like they know what they're doing. You are used to every single pass being crisp, and you are used to decisions, changes. You are used to what swings games being a great play as opposed to clunky mistakes. This series has been a little bit different. The first few games that Florida won, a lot of it was Edmonton mistakes. A lot of people were having fun at Evan Bouchard's expense after game number 3, the turnovers that led directly to the 1 Florida goal. But Edmonton did a nice job tonight, and Florida did them a solid. You go look at the box scores, not a lot of shots on goal for guys on the Florida sheet. We'll talk a little bit about that. Not a lot of shots. And you would think a low event game would favor Florida. And most of the time that's been the case this season, because their style is really optimized for their best players to be the difference, for guys like Reinhart, guys like Kachuk, guys like Barkov. But tonight, Edmonton kind of beat them at their own game. They did not have a ton of opportunities to score, but the ones they did have off of the rush, they were really well put together. The Draisaitl pass on the Foegele goal was that was beautiful. I know Leon hasn't had as nuclear a finals as McDavid, but that pass to Foegele is just insane. There are not a lot of guys in the world who can do that. So coming up next, we're going to build it out a little bit more. We're going to talk about the series kind of at large, the momentum. So stick around and we will be right back. Hey, Locked On Oilers fans, I want to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Do you think you can run the Oilers better than Ken Holland? Do you want to take the job once he leaves after Monday? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and lead it to glory. Hire the right coaches like Chris Knobloch and staff like Paul Coffey. Trade players like acquiring Adam Henrique. Trade those draft picks to get Adam Henrique. Navigate free agency so you can sign guys like Corey Perry and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As an Oiler fan, you know there's no offseason. GMs are constantly making moves. We saw what happened on Wednesday of this week at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you're going to love it. I have it on my iPad. Yes, I'm an iPad kid. I've had a lot of fun toying around with improving some of these teams. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On Network listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On NHL in the game store, so make sure to check it out. Download the game, just visit hockeygm.app on a browser or look it up on Apple App Store or Google Play. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. I want to thank everybody listening to today's edition of Locked On Oilers. If you hear that faint murmuring sound, that's rain. It's like Bible raining outside. Maybe God had the Panthers in a parlay or something, but it's raining outside. So hopefully the power doesn't go out mid-episode. That would be a little unfortunate because we're cooking right now. And diagnosing playoff series, it's tricky. You don't want to harp on one thing, one player, or one decision because it's never one thing. You know, I had a professor in college a history professor in college say that every event has long, medium, and short range causes. And to diagnose the swing in the series as just a result of McDavid going crazy or Stuart Skinner getting more locked in or changing the defensive pairs or the penalty kill being lights out and getting the shorthanded goals or the Oilers special teams, their power play getting going, or maybe it's something on the Florida end of things where they can't buy a bounce or maybe Bob's letting in squeakers. I think everything is interconnected on some degree. I think it's important that we talk about hockey in a three-dimensional shape. The idea that this is all interconnected. It's not just McDavid's playing great. Well, McDavid's playing great because the defensemen are breaking the puck out cleaner. He's getting zone exits. He's building up speed. He's getting through in transition. I think Stuart Skinner is playing better because the defense in front of him is reducing his workload. They are generating more fluid zone exits. They are getting the puck out quicker. They're playing less overall defense. They're getting worn down less. And because they're able to get to transition faster, they're making Florida more uncomfortable. Florida's having to do things they're not as good at. Like we've talked about a lot, Florida's defensemen individually, none of those guys is a Norris caliber defenseman. What makes Florida effective is Forsling and Ekblad as a unit playing with whatever forward group is out there. Or you could talk about Mikkola or Oliver Ekman-Larsson or Kulikov. It all is interconnected. Part of the reason Florida's forward group has not looked as good is because what they're being asked to do. When Edmonton gets out to a 1, a 2, a 3-goal lead in these games, Florida has to start getting pucks more on net. They have to start shooting more. And by default, that is going to help Edmonton because they are shooting from further away. They are taking lower quality chances. That makes Stuart Skinner's life easier because they're shooting from further away. He's got more time to get in a position to square himself to the puck to identify where it's coming from. Because he's got more time, he's more likely to make a save. Because it's a lower quality chance, it's more likely for him to make the save. That's all connected. That's connected to the Oilers playing better defense. The Oilers playing better defense is connected to them playing better offense. It's all interconnected. And that's the thing. That's what makes hockey analysis different from the other sports is how fluid the game state is. We talked about this yesterday on the show, where really the only thing that's comparable is soccer, but that's at a significantly slower pace where, yeah, it's continuous. You have the occasional stoppage for a free kick or a corner. Where hockey, we got face-offs every couple minutes when play dies down, but the game state is constant and it is fluid. That's why you can't just chalk it up to any one thing. It's all interconnected, and it's what's made this series so interesting. Is we think about these games as how does game 1 impact game 2, game 2 impact game 3, game 3, game 4, etc. I don't think that's exactly right. Do I think human nature comes in at some point? Yes. I think Florida was definitely a little bit antsy tonight. I don't think they had anything close to their best game. I thought Florida was very clunky. I thought, like I said before, they made quite a few mistakes. Then they get behind 1-0. Connor Brown scores again. That $4 million against the cap next year is probably going to hinder them. They win on Monday. It doesn't matter. They win on Monday. Whoever the next GM is might be able to crowdfund to go fund me $4.3 million for Connor Brown. That's the type of thing where if you're going to make it happen, man, if you're going to make it happen, wait a minute. If you are going to make it happen, you need all hands on deck. You need all hands on deck if you are going to make something happen. And the Oilers found a way. It is, I don't want to say it's like impossible. I don't want to say it's ridiculous, but you look at these games, excuse me, it wasn't Connor Brown, it was Warren Fogle, excuse me. I was looking at the wrong box score. I have a lot of things going on in my brain concurrently right now, but the Oilers' ability, where even in the games McDavid hasn't been on the ledger, the games Draisaitl hasn't been on the ledger for goals, it's these guys. It's the Henriques, it's the Janmarks, it's the Connor Browns, it's the McLeods, it's Corey Perry. The Oilers transition from being choked out on the ground, and that was the comparison. You know, if you watch the episode I did 2 Sundays ago where I came back from Gov Ball wearing my Caitlin Clark Iowa jersey and my chest on the jersey was very, very sunburnt. If you remember, I said I'd spent the entire day trying to think of a comparison for how to explain how this process is, how this series was going. And I said it was an MMA fight. I said it was a grappler against a boxer, and the boxer was on the ground getting their arm ripped out of their socket. And then after game 5, I said, well, the boxer got back up at the end of the round and he tagged the grappler. He hit him on the nose. He's bleeding. They went back to their corners, and now the wrestler is leaking. He has got gashes. His eye is swollen. And the grappler, his arm might be out of his socket, but the boxer's arm might be out of his socket, but the grappler can't see out of his left eye. And we're going to have a game 7 on Monday for the Stanley Cup. First time since 2019, second time since 2011. This is what it's all about. I mean, I'm going to spend the next 2 days vibrating, thinking about this. We're going to watch the best player in the world in a game 7 for the Stanley Cup. Stuff like this just doesn't happen that often. You know, how many game 7s did Sid play in for the Stanley Cup? We're going way back. We're going 2008, 2009 when they were playing Detroit all those years ago, the Marion Hossa Bowl, if you guys remember that, how long ago that was. It's been a long time since we've seen the best player in the world in a winner go home for the Stanley Cup. And this is what makes sports great. A week ago, we were ready to call the Oilers dead, and slowly but surely, they worked their way back in. They were able to shift the pressure that was on them onto Florida. And like I said, boxer versus a wrestler. The boxer's left arm is out of his socket, so he can't jab, he can't block. You go the other side, the boxer can't see out of his left eye. We're going to have ourselves one for the ages on Monday. And yeah, could it be air out of the balloon like Bruins Blues game 7 was in 2019 where the Blues ran them out of their own barn? Yeah, it could be. I'm going to take the optimistic outlook here. The Oilers are here. Like I said on yesterday's show, and this is the last thing I'll say before we head to break. Like I said on yesterday's show, man, this don't happen that often. You're going to talk about this for the rest of your life, no matter what happens on Monday. You're going to talk about Connor McDavid being the first guy since Jean-Sébastien Giguère to win the Conn Smythe on the losing team if they lose, and the playoff run at large. Or you're going to be talking about McDavid being in the same conversation as Gretzky and Lemieux and Crosby for the best person to ever lace up a pair of skates to step on the ice in the National Hockey League. No matter what, this is something you're going to remember for the rest of your life. So we're going to take one more quick break. We'll come back and we'll set the table for Monday. Lock in. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is the same as it is to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. I want to thank everybody hanging out on this very late Friday night edition of Locked On Oilers. Yes, there was an episode that went out this morning for your listening pleasure, but when a team comes back from 3 games to none and wins game 6 and forces a game 7, you get 2 episodes in one day. Everybody's got to pitch in. Everybody's got to do their part. And this is what it's all about. You spend all year to get here. Think about it, okay? The Oilers got to training camp second week of September for testing to go into preseason. September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June. We're 10 months into this. We are 10 months into this. We are 9 days away from July. This journey started the second week of September of last year. We're 10 months into this journey, and you're telling me all the Oilers got to do one more game. One more game. The Oilers won themselves quite a few games in the regular season this year. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but the Oilers were pretty good in the regular season. I know it took firing a coach. I know it took changing the coach, getting on a crazy win streak. The Oilers won 49 games in the regular season. They've won 3 in this series. They won 4 against Dallas. They won 4 against Vancouver. They won 4 against LA. One more game. One more game. I'm not ready to say there's no pressure on Edmonton. Like I know a few people have said, a lot of people, I know that was a point that PK Subban had made the other day, that Edmonton just gets to a game 7 at that point. You got to feel pretty good. And I know I said that on the Friday morning episode of Locked On Oilers, the idea that you got here, you've got the story, like we just said, ending the last segment. You don't get here that often to begin with. Teams you can't take for granted being this good. And yeah, the Oilers have gotten some things to go their way. Every team has to get things to go to their way to get this far. Was it in the Oilers' plans to get a win from Cal Pickard against the Canucks? No, it wasn't. But it worked. They got the one win they needed in that series from their backup goalie. They went on. They won game 6 and 7. They're here. One game. One game. Not going to be easy. I struggle to think Florida is going to play as poorly as they did tonight on Monday. They had just about all of their mistakes come back to burn them. When Edmonton gets going in transition, they are dangerous, man, because it's not just McDavid. It's not just Draisaitl. It's Holloway. It's McLeod. It's Zach Hyman. Where even if they don't get a shot on goal, they get the puck in deep. They make Florida play defense, and that wears them down. Florida is big and strong, and they're a well-conditioned team. They're fast. They're not as fast as Edmonton. And yeah, Edmonton made some mistakes tonight. You know, if CC gets a better exit, Florida doesn't score their one goal. That goal happens because CC's at the half wall, and he jams it up the wall instead of trying to get it out of there himself. Yeah, he was under a little bit of pressure, but if he just takes another beat, he probably can get that puck out of there clean, and there's no turnover, and Florida doesn't score. Either way, I said it the other day, I'll repeat it again. Don't let them get to a game 7 because anything can happen in a game 7. The longer a series goes on, the more the underdog thinks they can do it. At the outset, Florida was a slight favorite. If I remember correctly, Edmonton was like plus 108, plus 110 for a series price. So slight underdog, nothing major, but slight underdog. Now, one game. One game. That's not a crazy ask. And you're never going to say a season where you were down 3-0, came back to force a game 7 was a failure. You're never going to say that. It's okay to be greedy. It's okay to want this. I want this. I want this for Edmonton. I want this for Connor McDavid. More than anything, I want this for Connor McDavid because for a lot of his career, a lot of him and Leon, I'll throw Draisaitl in here as well, those guys were forced to wear a lion's share of the blame for stuff that was not their fault. Those two guys were, oh, you can't win with those guys. How could you ever expect to build a good enough team paying those guys enough money? And that's coming from people who don't know what they're talking about. That is coming from people who are only looking at the box scores. That is only coming from people who have a tangential understanding of the game. You watch the way those guys play, and they brought this up on the ESPN broadcast as well. Yeah, McDavid didn't have a goal tonight. He facilitated one. He also played really good defense tonight. And sometimes that's what the game calls for. If your best player has that determination, or in Connor's case, that programming, because there's a slight chance he is just a hockey robot because the guy's the Terminator out there. And that's not a comment on his personality. If anything, I think the fact he's gotten more comfortable over the last handful of years as both a leader and a player has enabled him to speak out more about things he's passionate and cares about. And I do think that matters. But this is an incredible moment for the sport, for the league. You have the consensus best player in the world going into a sudden death, winner-take-all game for the best trophy in all of sports. The NBA season is over. Yes, the NBA draft is next week. Yes, the NHL draft is next week. But there are no other national sports storylines to swallow you up. Yeah, the Euros are going on and Copa America is going on. And I'm sure there will be a segment on the Talking Head shows about how America does in their first game on Sunday. This is a golden opportunity for the NHL and the Oilers to really cement themselves, to cement Connor McDavid as the face of the sport and make this moment a crowning moment for the world's best player. And I know it. I was trying to think who said this to me, and then I remembered it was Armando on the first crossover we did, Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers. He said, this kind of feels, talking about McDavid, this kind of feels like LeBron with Miami. You know, this is the best player in the world. He's gotten a lot of flack for coming up short in big moments, even though it wasn't only his fault because it's a team sport. And like we said in the outset, short, medium, and long-term problems all add up into whatever specific moment you're talking about. And yeah, we're here. Game 7, Monday night. You wish it was at home because that building was so loud. It was beautiful. It was so good. That is what a hockey crowd sounds like. And ESPN has not figured out the sound mixing the way Sportsnet has. Whenever I watch highlights from the Sportsnet feed, I smile to myself because I realized it's not okay. I might not be having the best viewer experience, but at least somebody is getting the full flavor of the crowd, because when that crowd up in Edmonton roars, that's what it's supposed to sound like. But that will just about do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcast. If you could be so kind, give the show a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're watching over on YouTube, subscribe button, hit the alarm bell, get a notification anytime new content goes live. I will talk to you guys Monday ahead of Game 7. Cover as many bases as we possibly can. Until then, let's go Oilers.